The American Southwest is currently built on a collective multi-billion-dollar hallucination. If you fly over the Phoenix or Tucson metropolitan areas, the view from the window defies all ecological logic. You see an aggressive, brilliant green carved straight out of the jagged, sun-bleached dirt. There are emerald golf courses that suck up millions of gallons of water every single day just to stay presentable for retirees. There are massive crystalline infinity pools wrapping around stucco mansions, glistening under a desert sun that regularly pushes temperatures past 115 degrees. It looks like an absolute monument to human ingenuity and the triumph of engineering over nature. In reality, it is a highly volatile speculative sandbox that has officially run out of time. For the past 3 decades, the recipe for building generational wealth in the American desert was insultingly simple. You bought a patch of raw dirt where nothing but cactus and rattlesnakes had survived for 10,000 years. You paved it. You built a master-planned community with an evocative, comforting name like Whispering Ranch or Desert Oasis. Then, you sold it to a remote worker from California or a retiree from Chicago for a massive profit. The market seemed completely invincible. The sun shined 300 days a year, the local taxes were low, and the physical space for expansion seemed infinite. But physical space was never the limiting factor. The true limit was always invisible, buried deep underground, or flowing through concrete canals from hundreds of miles away. Turn on your kitchen faucet tonight. If you live in certain rapidly expanding corners of Arizona, you might not get a clean, cool stream of water. You might get nothing but a dry, hollow rattle, a metallic hiss. That precise sound is the popping of the biggest real estate asset bubble in modern American history. The grand illusion of endless water in a scorching wasteland is finally shattering, and the financial fallout is going to be absolutely spectacular. This is not an environmental sob story about saving a rare desert pupfish or conserving nature. This is a cold, calculated autopsy of a collapsing suburban real estate market. It is a literal roadmap of financial ruin that any sane home buyer needs to understand before sinking their life savings into a mirage. Right now, entire master-planned communities are drying up from the groundwater down. People who spent their hard-earned money on pristine suburban cul-de-sacs are waking up to discover that their 30-year mortgages are going to heavily outlast their local municipal water supplies. Think about the sheer paradox of this situation. You can own a gorgeous 4-bedroom property with high-end stainless steel appliances, smart home automation, and a manicured yard. But your house is legally becoming completely worthless because the aquifer beneath your foundation is running on empty. It is a modern ghost town scenario playing out in real time, not in the rugged 19th century. But right now, in the era of high-speed fiber internet and institutional real estate portfolios, the structural rules of the desert housing game have changed overnight. The Arizona Department of Water Resources has begun doing something that developers and local politicians never thought would actually happen. They are telling the absolute truth about the mathematical reality of water. State hydrological models are now showing massive, multi-million acre-foot deficits in underground basins. The federal government is aggressively hacking away at Colorado River allocations as reservoirs hit historic lows. The cheap, easy, unmonitored water that fueled the entire Sunbelt boom is officially gone. What remains is a brutal high-stakes scramble for survival between cash-strapped municipalities, deep-pocketed corporate agricultural syndicates, and millions of completely clueless homeowners who bought into the dream at the absolute peak of the market. We are going to map out the exact 10 Arizona municipalities where the bottom is completely falling out of the real estate market. We will trace a path through the far west suburbs where building permits are hitting an absolute brick wall, through the rural agricultural valleys where domestic wells are sucking up pure mud, and all the way to the ultimate destination on this dangerously dry highway. We are going to look at a place where supposedly invincible, multi-million-dollar luxury desert estates are currently staring down a jaw-dropping 64% implosion in property values. The owners of these properties did not lose their fortunes to a typical stock market crash or a global banking crisis. They lost everything because a local water hauling truck simply stopped showing up. If you honestly believe your home equity is safe, just because your neighborhood looks green and prosperous today, you are making a catastrophic financial mistake. When a desert city runs out of water, it does not happen gradually with lawns slowly turning yellow over a decade. It happens instantly. It happens via quiet, bureaucratic memos, abruptly revoked building certificates, and commercial banks suddenly refusing to write mortgages for properties that are deemed uninsurable dust piles. The smart money is already quietly packing up its moving trucks and exiting these suburbs before the wider public finally wakes up to the terrifying scale of this disaster. If you want to protect your personal wealth, you need to see exactly where the ground is giving way. Packing extra drinking water is highly advised as we pull into the very first dusty, sun-baked driveway on our route. The current disaster is not an unpredicted accident. It is the direct mathematical consequence of a 40-year-old political compromise that prioritized immediate real estate profits over basic physics. To understand how Arizona built a booming suburban empire on a foundation of absolute dryness, you have to look at 1980. By the late 1970s, cities like Phoenix and Tucson were pumping out fossil groundwater at a pace 500 times faster than nature could ever replenish it. The ground in some parts of the valley was literally cracking open, forming massive fissures as the deflated aquifers collapsed under the weight of the dirt above. The federal government stepped in with a brutal ultimatum if Arizona wanted Washington to fund the construction of the Central Arizona Project, a multi-billion-dollar 336-mile canal system designed to pump Colorado River water uphill into the desert. The state had to pass strict laws to control its rampant groundwater pumping. Central Arizona Project. The result was the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. This piece of legislation created active management areas across the most heavily populated counties and established the legendary Assured Water Supply Program. The law stated that before any developer could build a new subdivision, they had to legally prove that they had a guaranteed, uninterruptible supply of water that would last for at least 100 years. If you could not prove the 100-year supply, the state would refuse to issue a public report, making it completely illegal to market or sell a single plot of land to a home buyer. On paper, it was hailed as the most forward-thinking, environmentally responsible water law in the entire United States. In reality, the law contained a massive intentional structural loophole that became known as the geographic trap of the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. Arizona State Library, archives, and public records show the loop worked beautifully for decades. If a developer wanted to build thousands of homes in a far-flung desert suburb that had zero access to actual river water or sustainable municipal pipes, they did not have to prove they had physical water on site. Instead, they simply paid a fee to join this replenishment district. The legal fiction allowed them to pump whatever groundwater they wanted from the vulnerable aquifer directly beneath the new homes, under the promise that the district would eventually find excess water somewhere else, usually from the Colorado River, and inject it back into the ground at a completely different location to offset the deficit. It was a classic environmental shell game. For 40 years, the state allowed massive master-planned communities to sprout across the desert floor based on the assumption that there would always be an endless, cheap supply of surplus Colorado River water flowing through the Central Canal to bail out the developers. Pima County. The geographic trap officially snapped shut when the Colorado River Basin entered the worst multi-decade drought in over 1,200 years. The massive reservoirs of Lake Mead and Lake Powell began dropping toward catastrophic levels, forcing the federal government to trigger unprecedented mandatory water cutbacks. Because of a historical quirk in the original 1968 federal funding agreement, Arizona had greedily agreed to take a junior water right status on the river in exchange for getting the canal built. This meant that when shortages hit the river, Arizona would take the absolute first and deepest cuts before California lost a single drop. By the 2020s, hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of Colorado River water vanished from Arizona's available portfolio. The excess water that was supposed to be used to replenish the overpumped suburban aquifers simply ceased to exist. This historical timeline brings us directly to the present crisis. The state can no longer afford to maintain the legal fiction of the grandfathered water loop. When state hydrologists finally ran updated, comprehensive computer models on the underground basins, the numbers were utterly devastating. They revealed that the Phoenix Active Management Area alone is staring down an unmet groundwater demand of nearly 5 million acre-feet over the next century. There is a massive, invisible ocean of missing water, and the state has been forced to start shutting down the growth engine. This historical policy failure is precisely why the housing markets in the 10 specific cities on our list are not just experiencing a temporary real estate downturn. They are experiencing a structural, permanent environmental correction that is systematically wiping out billions of dollars in speculative home equity. The theoretical abstract calculations of state hydrologists have officially translated into a direct, high-stakes collision between corporate interests, local governments, and everyday homeowners. If you want to see exactly how this mathematical deficit paralyzes a community, look no further than the western edge of the Phoenix Valley in Buckeye. For a decade, Buckeye was marketed as the fastest-growing city in America, a place where institutional home builders bought massive cotton fields and turned them into endless rows of low-cost stucco housing. But when the state water authorities finalized their comprehensive groundwater model, they confirmed that the aquifer beneath Buckeye could not sustain the projected development. The state enacted an immediate freeze on approving new subdivisions that rely solely on groundwater. The direct consequence of this bureaucratic intervention is a severe structural distortion of the local economy. Major developers who poured billions into raw land inventory suddenly found themselves holding unbuildable dirt, according to residential transaction databases. Housing inventory in these far west outer rings has surged dramatically as early buyers and speculative investors scramble to exit their positions before the market fully internalizes the water freeze, moving south into Pinal County. The town of Florence represents the escalating conflict between legacy agriculture and modern residential expansion. Historically, this valley relied on deep groundwater wells and Colorado River allocations to cultivate massive fields of water-intensive cotton and alfalfa. As federal mandates slashed river allocations to zero for regional agricultural districts, farmers were forced to pivot entirely to pumping groundwater. Simultaneously, residential developers attempted to buy out these farming parcels to build master-planned commuter communities. This created a zero-sum territorial war over the remaining underground water tables. The local active management area is facing a projected deficit of millions of acre-feet of water, prompting strict regulatory pushback. Real estate metrics highlight that the median days on market for single-family residences in Florence has stretched out significantly, signaling a severe erosion of buyer confidence as the realities of the local aquifer enter standard property disclosures. Raw acreage without grandfathered, certified water rights has experienced steep devaluations, transforming yesterday's premium real estate plays into highly toxic financial liabilities in nearby Coolidge. The collapse of speculative growth has left behind a landscape of half-finished municipal infrastructure and stalled subdivisions. When the state officially declared that specific local water companies could not prove a 100-year assured supply, developers abruptly halted construction mid-phase. This left young families residing in isolated pockets of completed homes surrounded by weed-choked, unpaved lots and exposed utility conduits. The impact on the local municipal tax base is catastrophic. When a city's projected property tax revenues crater due to abandoned residential projects, the municipality loses the precise funding mechanism required to upgrade or deepen its water infrastructure. This creates a highly destructive, self-reinforcing financial cycle. Foreclosure filings and stagnant home values are concentrated precisely in the zip codes most exposed to these infrastructure failures, leaving late-stage buyers trapped in negative equity with properties that cannot easily be refinanced or sold. Further south in Marana, the crisis takes a premium form, targeting affluent retirees and remote tech workers who paid top dollar for custom desert estates featuring panoramic mountain views and luxury amenities. Marana's rapid expansion was heavily subsidized by the Central Canal, which dragged water uphill from the shrinking Colorado River. As federal guidelines mandate deeper cuts to the state's river allotment, the local utility board has been forced to pass the escalating structural costs directly onto consumers. Tiered residential utility rates have surged exponentially, transforming a home's monthly carrying costs into an additional mortgage payment. Homeowners associations are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to prematurely rip out manicured grass landscapes and replace them with heat-absorbing rock, leading to sharp spikes in mandatory monthly association fees. Redfin market analytics indicate that luxury listings priced in the upper echelons are sitting idle on the market for months, with sellers repeatedly cutting asking prices as buyers realize that maintaining an infinity pool in an unmitigated desert oasis carries an unsustainable financial penalty. The reality of this crisis is that the American desert housing boom is running directly into its physical and legal limits. The structural mechanisms that once hid the water scarcity, such as temporary replenishment agreements and loose municipal oversight, are completely breaking down under the pressure of a multi-decade drought. Whether it is an affordable starter home in a far-flung suburb or a multi-million-dollar custom estate, the foundational value of real estate is entirely dictated by the presence of a verified, legally binding water pipe. As those pipes face unprecedented regulatory and physical constraints, the entire desert market is undergoing a volatile, permanent environmental correction that is actively vaporizing billions of dollars